Praise be Jesus Christ, Ave Maria. Well, now here's another cold take from an old Jesuit. And no, it's not Father James Martin. Rather, it's Father Thomas Reese of the Society of Jesus, who has recently published an article for Religion News Service entitled, "The Catholic Church Cannot Admit Something That It Taught for Centuries is Dumb." Now, I have the article in front of me, and I'm coming off the top of the dome, so excuse me if I slip and trip over my own words. Now, there's several things I'd like to talk about in this article. What I do not want to address is the supposed antagonism that radical traditionalists or traditionalists have for Pope Francis, where they would bury him if he, quote unquote, closed limbo, but they take it easy on Pope Benedict. That's Reese's own thing. That's his own trip. What I do want to talk about is the fact that Father Reese seems to have no idea just what in the limbo he's talking about when it comes to limbo. Limbo was never a dogma. It was never a doctrine. It was what we call a theologumenon. It was a theological opinion, and there's good reason for it. See, in the Gospels, we see how Jesus Christ says that unless you be born again of water and the Spirit, you cannot see the kingdom of heaven. Now, it's without a doubt that he's speaking about baptism. And we believe as Catholics, and always have, that it is necessary to be baptized to see God, or at least have the grace of baptism applied to your soul. So what happens to those infants who die, who are unbaptized? Now, they have committed no actual sin, so they do not deserve to suffer the pangs of hellfire. But they are stained with original sin, as we all are. We inherited that from our first parents. We inherited that from Adam, the stain of original sin. So, in the West at least, it has been speculated that there is a place, a state, called limbo. Now, this comes from the Latin limbus, which means the boundary or the periphery. So you could say in a very real way that this is something like the outer edge of hell. Why would we say that? Because there's only two everlasting states, heaven or hell. Purgatory ends at the eschaton. Purgatory ends when time ends. So what happens to these unbaptized souls that don't deserve suffering but cannot enter the beatific vision? We call this limbo. Now, it is true in recent decades that more of an emphasis has been placed upon the mercy or the loving kindness of God, and that we have a great hope, and this has always been true, by the way, but we have a great hope that God will call all the souls of those unbaptized babies to himself. We know that Jesus Christ redeemed all of them on the cross with his salvific death, and we know that God wills the salvation of all. But what we can't do, as Father Reese does in his article, and shame on him for it, we can't say that we know with metaphysical certainty that unbaptized babies who die go straight to heaven. We can't do that. Why? Because we are bound by divine revelation, and we have to hold two things in tension, in harmony somehow. That God desires that all be saved and that he is merciful and loving, but that it is necessary to be born again of water and the Spirit. And that in Adam, in a very real way, all have died. Just like in Christ, all can be made new again. So far from being, as Father Reese calls it, dumb, limbo is actually a very good idea. And in some ways, I miss limbo. But the point is, it's not dumb. It's not cruel. It's a place that is in the theological imagination, you could say. It's an answer to a very tough question. How can we hold these two things in tension? God desires all to be saved. Jesus Christ has redeemed all. These babies are not guilty of any actual sin, but they have not been born again by water and the Spirit. One thing I can say, if you're a parent, if you're a mother who's pregnant, if you've got a very little baby or one on the way, do not hesitate to get that child baptized. There is no reason to delay baptism. This idea that I can just sit back on my haunches and everything's okay, this is a very real problem. So that's my thoughts and opinions on the article. I'd probably have more to say if I had more time, but maybe we can explore limbo in depth a little more in the future.